There's another way, though. Like some of us, it isn't that we deny our fear and take excessive risks. Some of us cave into our fear completely. And there's no wisdom in that either. It's like, we're standing on the wall here, see? And this is the wall, and we're at this dance that we call life. And there's a bunch of us at the wall, and we don't look like we're having a real great time, right? Then there's some people out there dancing that seem to be having a good time. And we look at them. We think that might be fun, but it's kind of scary. You know, if I go over and ask that person to dance, what might happen? Well, they might reject me. They might say no. And if they say no, where will I end up? Where am I going to end up if I go over and they say no and I'm back at the wall? What have I lost? I'm just right back to where I started. I didn't lose anything. I might have even enjoyed the trip out. A little kind of fun about thinking, fantasizing, hey, this person might, I'm not back. I don't enjoy the trip back, but, I get back anyway. The other thing is that when I go to a dance, I think I'm on the wall, and I think, oh, God, if I'm out there, people will laugh at me. They will. I mean, that happens to me. People laugh at me when I dance. But the fact is that if I don't dance, I'm not having any fun. If I do dance, I'm having fun, and they're having fun too, laughing at me. So everybody wins if I dance. You want to have a good time? Invite me to a dance. You don't even have to dance yourself. Or I might sprain an ankle. I'm so afraid of a sprained ankle that I won't use my body. I won't take any risks, and that's ridiculous. There are some risks that we have to take and some pain that we have to face. And some of us have been hurt so much, and we don't feel safe enough to take any risks, and we're not living our life. You live life when you take risks. Risks of injury, risks of rejection, risk in relationship, risk of ridicule, risk of being ashamed of you. Those are risks. But they're not life-defying, life-risking, family-risking kind of risks. They're just the risks that are about living and living a full and complete life. That's wisdom to me. That we have wisdom when we take risks, but not the kind of risks that are going to wipe us out, screw us up, or hurt the people that we care about. That's why I say acceptance of our fear gives us wisdom. I want to talk some about shame, too. Shame is a key therapeutic concept for so many of us, and it hasn't really been a hot topic for very long. There's a few books about shame now, and there's more talk about it. I think shame happens primarily in our relationships with others, and shame doesn't occur outside of relationship, really. After it happens to us, though, when we get shame, it can occur in a lot of different ways. Shame is usually a childhood issue, and it comes to us because of abuse, again, neglect, abandonment in childhood. It's like if you could imagine that there's a natural bridge between a child and a parent. And let's say that bridge is made out of bricks. Well, kind of how it goes is that the job of raising kids is to guide the child's process of removing the bricks. Okay? When the parent removes the bricks, or throws them at the kid feels somehow that there's something wrong with them. If the child breaks the bridge, the child feels like it's their fault. Even if the parent's sick, abusive, alcoholic, rageful, even if the parent dies, the child feels like there's something wrong with me. That parent isn't there anymore. It's my fault. See, and it's like if a parent is abusing a child or disappointing a child or letting the child down, child will say, there's something wrong with me that parent doesn't love me. I am worth less than the parent. So tied in with shame, of course, in our worthless feelings that we have about ourselves. We find ourselves wanting. There's something wrong with ourselves. Now, the other thing, of course, the next part of shame is then I don't have a right to depend on that parent. I cannot depend on the parent. And hence our dependency issues get mixed up with the shame. And I think that then people with a lot of shame tend to get into more dependency. So shame empowers addiction, like chemical dependency, codependency, food dependency, or sex dependency, or whatever it is. See? Addiction. The basis of a lot of addiction is shame. Shame also then addiction increases the feeling of shame, right? And so then we need the addiction more. So there's a shame addiction spiral that gets set up in our life. Now, recovery from shame, it's a hard one. The first thing is to experience it. We have to feel as bad as we do feel about ourselves. And if you've experienced that and feel bad with someone with you, you're learning that you can have the feeling of shame but still depend on people, which is automatically lessening the shame. If we have a lot of shame, we're going to get into more shame-based behaviors. Kids that get in shame-based behaviors are behaviors that sort of like the acting out that says the world's a shitty place, I'm going to rip it off, so I'm going to shoplift. Or, I have a body, it can give me pleasure and I can feel good for a while, so I'm going to use it every chance I get sexually in any way that I can. And even though we know that there's some harmful consequences to that, we're going to do it. Drug use makes sense to someone with a lot of shame. In fact, you can take a group of kids with a lot of shame and you can teach them forever about the harmful consequences of drug use. You'll scare them for 2 days. There's a whole lot of speakers going around scaring kids. They're going to go blind and get warts if they smoke marijuana. Or is that something else? I forget. It is something else. Well, they're saying it about marijuana too. And well, now we're teaching kids that it's because of marijuana. Before we were being taught that it was because of masturbation and stuff. Anyway, so and you can't scare shame-based kids out of using, because the more you teach them about harmful consequences, the more it makes sense for them to use. Because part of shame is the belief that you deserve bad things. You deserve punishment. You deserve harmful consequences. So even shoplifting, getting caught, it becomes a part of the shoplifting. And that affirms your worldview. You can't trust, people will punish you. In dealing with shame-based kids, I think it's really important to always maintain witness. Like when I was in a classroom, if a kid was acting out, I'd say, get the heck out of here. Give them the boot out, or get down to the principal's office. And if it's a shame-based kid, what I realized is I was shaming them even more, sending them away, making them feel like, there's something wrong with them, and our relationship was over. The key part of shame is the relationship is ended. And what I learned to do was I say, I can't accept the behavior because I've got to teach a class, but I still care about you, and I want you to wait so that, you can go down to the principal's office and I'll go with you, because I want to support you through the whole process of what's going on with you and what consequences you have. See, I maintain relationship. It's like shame is about who we are. And guilt is more about our behavior. So if I walk home and I see my son playing with my stereo, and let's say I have a rule that's for adults only, and I get the heck away from that stereo. You break everything you touch around here, just get the hell out of here. What have I done? I told him that he was a mistake, not that he made a mistake. I made him feel bad about who he was, not what he was doing. What if I say, David, I told you that the stereo is for adults only. I'm really angry that you're playing with it without talking to me. And if there's some music that you want to hear, I'd really be glad to play something for you. And in fact, I'll do that right now if you want to hear it. Notice the difference? I was clear that he did something wrong and needs to feel guilty, but I'm also very clear that there's still relationship here. And the shame comes from the broken relationship. Anybody here from an alcoholic family system that, How many? Okay. Now, I really believe that alcoholism is a long series of broken relationships, broken promises, and shame. But it's also, there's a level of it that's called public humiliation that we have in an alcoholic family system. And there's just a humiliation about the alcoholic and what's happening and how the behavior occurs and around friends. And some families will actually, like scold their kids when other people are around, or put them down, or make fun of them, or break promises and stuff. And that public humiliation, I think, sets up internalized shame real quickly. And the internalized shame, then the shame becomes a part of our fabric. The core of who we are feels bad about who we are. And I know that I had so much shame in my life that people would say things that good about me, like, hey, that was a really good job, or I really liked the lecture. I couldn't let it in. I couldn't feel good about good things that I was doing because of that feeling of shame. I call it cellular shame. It's like every cell in your body, not like the telephones that you can operate independently without wires. Every cell of your body has this shame, bad feeling about it, and that the best I could do is start scraping them clean one by one so I can let it in a little bit, at a time. And pretty soon you can start feeling better about yourself. But I think shame is something that you can experience, for a long time. You may get shame attacks periodically, or you may never get them again. But there's still a level that we have our shame, and maybe even that we need our shame. Because the one good thing that we get from our shame is it keeps us from being God, or from thinking that we can be God. It keeps us from thinking that we can do anything and be anything, that we're all powerful. It keeps us acknowledging. It's like if you're banging your sister over the head, and your mom comes and says, maybe I can't stop you from doing it, for some reason, whatever reason could be, she could paraplegic. But she says, I don't love you when you're doing that. Now that's shaming, but the fact is that when we're not, when we're really hurting someone, we deserve to have that love withdrawn until we see that behavior is shameful behavior. There's some things that we do that are shameful, that are about being bad people. But we need that much shame. We need enough shame to keep from going to the supermarket naked. That's all we need. And so much so we have this much. And what shame sets up, see, if you feel bad about yourself inside and you can't depend on people, what you set up is control, manipulation, and sometimes rage that keeps people from ever seeing what's going on inside. And the control and manipulation, sets us up for more addiction, doesn't it? What is addiction but about control? That's the disease. The disease is really control. That we're trying to control feelings, we're trying to control our use of the addiction, we're trying to control other people, and that comes from shame. We want to control our feelings because we don't have a right to them, because that's what shame says. You don't have a right to your feelings. You don't have a right to your being. Our feelings are a part of our being, a core part of it. The shame says that you don't have a right to depend on others, so we become an addict, the dependency issues. In the recovery of shame, there's a couple of things, and I talked a little bit about the being witness and going down in the shame, but there's another part. In fact, I even think that the first stage is to learn to identify your shame. Shame is a tough feeling to identify. A lot of times it just comes as a message that we're wanting, that we aren't doing it good enough, there's something wrong with us. Messages about dependency and stuff like that. And it doesn't even come like as a feeling of anger that maybe, you get mad and tight gut. So shame comes a little bit differently. So first recognizing the shame. I think if you have shame, it's a good idea to engrave it on the inside of your forehead somehow and then line it with neon lights and have a loose plug. And whenever you get criticized, judged, or evaluated or rejected, anybody have a hard time with those four things? Okay. What happens is that you immediately assume that you're a bad person. So then if you can, when you get criticized, judged, evaluated, or rejected, plug in the sign, it's shame. Oh, that's my shame. That's just a feeling. A feeling that came from a lot of years of this other stuff happening to me, and that maybe I really am okay. And immediately when you see that sign, what you need to do is find someone that cares about you, or give yourself some caring. In fact, the quickest cure for shame that I know is to ask someone if they like you. And the quickest way back into it is if they say no. So always be careful of who you ask. Identifying the shame is tough. I've talked with clients about shame, and 30 seconds later I say something, and then all of a sudden they get quiet, and I don't find out for 2 days that what I said shamed them because they thought it was a criticism, instead of I was just noticing something that they always did that I thought might be helpful to them. See, and that I don't believe that was me shaming them. I believe that our shame gets kind of automated and it comes up at a lot of different times. Sometimes we get shame just by introspecting. In fact, I think a lot of the human doings are human doings because they can't slow down long enough, because whenever they look inside themselves, they see so much shame and feel so much shame that they can't live with themselves. So they always have to be busy and active. So it's the introspection. Sometimes when we have feelings, we get ashamed. And sometimes we're ashamed of our sexuality. So when we get close to someone or we have sexual feelings, we get ashamed. Sometimes it's a physical shame. We're ashamed of our bodies. And we gain weight, we increase the shame, and maybe sometimes that weight gain is protecting our sexuality because we're ashamed of our sexuality or afraid of it, like we've been sexually abused. And so we have this layer of insulation around our sexuality. And a lot of people, that have excess weight are, they have that shame, and a lot of times it's tied up with the sexuality. I'm just giving some examples of shame, but any questions about that? It's a key thing, and recovery takes time. And it's not, shame is something that we need to experience, we need to feel, even when it feels bad. Okay, want to talk about, yes?
I'm just going to say, I don't care for the feelings, because if somebody is critical, I react, and then that person takes advantage of those feelings like crying. I don't know how to hide what I'm feeling.
Yeah. So the statement is that a lot of times we don't like our feelings because when we show our feelings, people use them to hurt us. Is that it? Okay, and that is true. That's why we need our defenses. That's why we need safe places and support systems and networks to help us learn why it is we keep getting around people that always hurt us when we have our feelings. What is it in the system, or what are we doing with our feelings that might be setting us up? And the defenses can help us get through that. But the support systems, the therapy, the 12-step programs, those other things we can start getting feedback about changing it. And that becomes, again, a therapeutic process to make those changes. Yes?
How can you allow yourself to feel that shame without subsequently beating yourself up and criticizing and picking it apart? Without that mental part?
Well, I really think you just go into the mental part and talk about it. Make it explicit. I feel like I'm such a dummy, and I hate myself so much, and this is how bad I feel about myself, and then the person says, yeah, I go through that too, and I still love you. And all of a sudden, hey, another part of, how can you have too much shame when someone's loving you as you're telling them how bad you feel about yourself, or accepting you, and that becomes, you're depending. You see, if you tell me how bad you feel about yourself, you're going through the shame, but you know what you're doing? You're also breaking out of the shame, because it's like you're depending on me. You're saying you're worth enough to take the time to tell me how bad you feel about yourself, and you're depending on me not to shame you more with that feeling. And so it works.
Okay, so you have to do it in conjunction with something. Because I can get shame attacks.
Oh yeah, the shame attacks themselves are not healing at all. The healing part is when you get with someone and you depend on them to help you through it. Okay, that's breaking the shame. Another way of dealing with the shame is we can do a lot of symbolic work. I think the best therapists I know do a lot of symbolic work with the shame. The giving it back to where it came from as a symbolic way of lessening the shame. The getting angry at who it was that hurt us. I have more worth and I'm mad that you did that to me. And I have a right to be mad, and you didn't have a right to do it. That's lessening the shame itself and dealing with some of the anger. Anger work is a real important part, I think, of shame reduction. And having the pain and depending on people and getting nurturing and more parenting and learning that, it's all part. Sometimes imaging, and imaging yourself the way you really are instead of the way you feel about yourself. I've had people look at chairs, and they say, I'm in this chair and this is how I feel, and then they go into all their shameful stuff, and they say, over in that chair is the person who, is making a success out of himself, that people seem to respect and like, that has good friends, that cares a lot about the family. And I'm sitting in this chair feeling bad about myself. And all I do is I'll walk over to that chair, I'll sit in that chair where I just described that person, and immediately I feel the way I described that person. I feel wonderful about myself. It's a weird thing, but you can try it sometime. But that's symbolic, and it works. That's the key. Symbolic work becomes real. It makes a difference in our life. I want to talk about guilt. Guilt and shame get mixed up a lot. Guilt is different than shame. Guilt is a denial of our uniqueness. See, shame is a denial of our, dependency needs and a sense of our worthlessness. Now, some families, like you have to get into role reversals where you take care of the families. You deny being a child, or it's denied of you, and that you have to do things that aren't about being a child, like be your mother's husband or your dad's surrogate spouse or your parent's parent or a little parent of your brothers and sisters or whatever. All those roles that you get into, those are guilt-based roles. And the parents that love kids, you say, I love you, so of course you're going to be exactly like me or be the person I want you to be. That's not love. That's guilt described or disguised as love. And when we have the guilt, then we can't be ourselves. Guilt is a part of enmeshment, and guilt is a veneer of codependency. All right, so the key then is that we take care of our uniqueness, and that's guilt reduction. And the other part though is that guilt does roll into shame. When we feel the guilt, we have so much of our uniqueness denied. Eventually, we start feeling worthless. Doesn't denial of uniqueness lessen our worth? And if the people around us are always using us and guilting us, isn't that also a message that there is no real relationship? And that's a shaming experience. So guilt rolls into shame eventually, and we end up with both. And in dysfunctional families, the family members end up with both shame and guilt, and it controls a lot of the basis of their life. The positive part of guilt, of course, is it gives us conscience formation. We develop conscience from our guilt. And without guilt, we don't have conscience. People who we call sociopathic or psychopathic, they are people that do not have a developed sense of guilt, and often they have a very highly developed sense of shame, though. They feel bad about themselves, and usually what they feel bad about is that when they get caught. A lot of offenders that I've worked with talk about feeling bad, but when you really find out what they feel bad about is that they have to be in therapy, that they got caught, not that they hurt other people. So part of the process of recovery is learning that other people's pain is real and that you have to have pain about the ways that you've hurt other people and learning the guilt system. So guilt is a positive feeling, but when it's controlling our life and denying our uniqueness, there's nothing positive about it. Any questions on the feelings? Yes?
I have more of a religious kind of biblical question about fear.
Okay.
About that fear isn't from God, therefore it's not good. It's kind of what I've been told to believe. And I have a real hard time following that. I don't understand where they're coming from and how it all fits in with recovery.
Well, if what I say, though, is true, that fear gives us wisdom, and the wisdom to lead healthy lifestyle, and lifestyle is our spirituality, because our lifestyle is what gives us life. And when we do the things that give us life, then we're operating within God's plan for us and becoming the person we were intended to be. So I do believe that, that what you're saying makes sense to me in the context of how I put it, even though I wouldn't necessarily say it the same way. Because I'm a firm believer that lifestyle depends on our ability to have and embrace our feelings. And that death style, the style of addiction, addiction is death-giving. That's death style. That's anti-spirituality. Our lifestyle is our spirituality. Our relationship with creation, the Creator, and the creative process that is our becoming the person we were created to be. And fear ties in with that very much. So, I don't know if that's helpful, but sexuality is also important, and we'll talk about that later.